Hi, Dreki here, and today I'm reviewing the ThiEYE T5e. This little action camera is based on the Umbrella A12 platform, which means it does real 4K at 30 frames per second. The resulting excellent image quality and low price point means that this camera is a great value, although it's clear that there were some cutbacks to make that low price point. Let's start by looking at what's included in the box. It becomes pretty obvious why the T5e is so inexpensive once it comes to the accessory kit that's included. Included with this camera is very minimal accessories, 2 batteries thankfully, 1 sticky mount, some extra stickers, and a USB cable. That's about it. So this is both a blessing and a curse. It's a good thing because most of the accessories included with cheaper action cameras are very poor quality and break quite easily, meaning that you'd have to go out and buy your own accessories anyways. But the lack of included accessories means that the ThiEYE can keep the price a little bit lower, but at the same time that means that the T5e is not ready to go out of the box. The other thing that I noticed that really screams low price point is this waterproof case. It doesn't have the extra latch on it, meaning that it's just one motion to open it. While this isn't necessarily the end of the world, for example my original GoPro had this style of case, I would prefer something a little bit more secure. That also brings to mind my other little issue with this camera, and that is that the camera is slightly bigger than an actual GoPro, meaning that all of these other cases that are out there on the market don't fit the camera. And even in some cases, quadcopter mounts or other GoPro mounts may not fit. That could be a pretty big deal breaker. The user interface of this camera is almost exactly what you'd expect from any action cam. The front button cycles through modes, the top button selects items and menus, or starts and stops recording, and the side buttons go up and down in the menus so you can see here. It's a little bit slow at times, but it's not unusable, about the same as any other Umbrella camera I've used to date.
So a little bit of backstory before we get into video quality. I've had several other $100 cams by this point, and generally they're okay, but they're not great. I knew that the Umbrella platform could do real 4K, but so often cams like this are equipped with fake 12 megapixel sensors or very poor lenses, so I'd come to expect a junk product at this price. Needless to say, I was shocked when I saw the first sample footage, and the T5 has fast become my go-to camera for day-to-day usage. The reason for that is daytime video quality is excellent. There is lots of detail, good color performance, and a wide dynamic range. The video is real 4K with no weird resolutions or frame rates. I primarily shot in 1080p mode because it's stabilized, and even 1080p mode looks a little bit better than some competitors because it is sharp, detailed, and lively. When I say that this camera has a wider dynamic range than other cams, what I mean is that there's more details in the shadow and the highlights. Compare for example to a Novatech camera, the Suku C30. The T5 has much warmer video with more yellow and lively tones, whereas the C30 has a little bit colder of a video that's a little bit more focused on blues and greens. There's one thing that the T5 does way better than Novatech cameras, and that is sky color. On the Novatech cameras there's often this weird gradient where it starts at a nice rich blue and then turns to kind of a pinkish gray near brighter spots, whereas on the T5 the sky is a smooth gradient from dark blue to bright white. Comparing this camera to the SJ7 Star is a little bit more difficult because the lines blur quite a lot. The video quality on the two cameras is almost identical, and although the SJ7 Star has a little bit nicer of a body, I end up preferring the T5e just because of its lower price point. I'll do a full comparison video soon because there's just not enough time to go down that rabbit hole in this video. As with most action cameras, this cam requires decent lighting to perform well. In mixed lighting there's some video noise and frame smudging, and in low light it gets so dark that you can't really see much. The effect of the frame smudging isn't as bad as some other cameras, though I do recommend using 30 frames per second instead of 60 frames per second in the dark. The 60 frames per second mode on this camera does start to drop frames, so they're almost the same in the end, but in my opinion it looks a little bit better to stick at 30 frames per second because you don't get that drop frames as quickly. In terms of audio quality, this was probably the most surprising part of the camera to me. Even sealed inside the waterproof case, this camera has comparable audio to other action cameras when they are outside of the case. So let's take a listen now and hear what that sounds like. Alright, so we're shooting 1080p 60 now, just in somewhat low light. It's kind of the sun is set and there's still a little bit of color among the clouds. I just wanted to see how well the electronic image stabilizer works in lower light. I'll get some footage on the way back too. In terms of image stabilizer, the stabilization is only electronic stabilization, and it only works in 1080p 60 or 30, which means it's pretty limited. Electronic image stabilizer is a software solution, meaning it's not as effective as hardware-based gyro stabilization. That being said, it definitely does help in situations where no stabilizer would have very jittery and jarring footage. Let's do a more in-depth comparison of this camera to the GetUp Kit 2 Pro, which is a very close camera in terms of price point. The T5e has real 4K at 30 frames per second and can also do 2.5K at 60 frames per second. The T5e has an improved color performance over the Get 2, but where the Get 2 really wins out is its stabilization. The image stabilizer on the Get 2 is one of the best that I've ever seen, and it really cancels out shaking. It works at both 1080p 60 and 2.5K 30 frames per second. The other thing that the Get 2 has over the T5e is better community support. But in terms of pure image quality, the T5e has got the Get 2 there. Overall, as I mentioned earlier, the T5e has fast become one of my favorite cameras and is the one that I'll pick up if I'm just going out to shoot around the neighborhood. It has great image quality, and even though it's a little bit bigger than a GoPro and has a couple things that are cheaped out on, I find that it's my favorite camera just because of how good that video is. Thanks for watching. Visit TrekkyTech.com for more.